Slave boy finds master's wife waiting in his cabin, and what she asked him to do left him frozen. In the heart of a southern plantation, Elijah's life is turned upside down when Clara, the master's wife, steps into his world. Her unexpected visit ignites a whirlwind of emotions, sparking a connection fraught with danger and desire. As their lives intertwine in secrecy, the tension builds, leading to choices that could change everything. On a sprawling southern plantation, the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows that danced across the fields of cotton. The air was thick with the scent of earth and the distant sound of cicadas, heralding the approach of evening. Elijah, a young boy of 16 with skin kissed by the sun, found solace in his modest cabin, a sanctuary from the relentless demands and harsh realities of his life as a slave. Within those 4 wooden walls, he often daydreamed of freedom, imagining a world beyond the confines of the plantation, where he could run without fear and breathe without the weight of oppression pressing down on him. But today felt different. A strange energy hung in the air, stirring anticipation in his chest like the first hints of a storm. The usual sounds of the plantation were muted, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Just as he began to relax into the comforting solitude of his thoughts, he heard footsteps approaching, the soft rustle of skirts and the faintest whisper of leather shoes against the wooden floor. The door creaked open, and Clara, the master's wife, appeared in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the fading light. Her eyes were wide, shimmering with an emotion he couldn't quite decipher. Was it fear, or perhaps something deeper? "Elijah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, thick with urgency. "I needed to see you." His heart raced, pounding in his chest like a war drum. What could she possibly want from him? They had shared fleeting glances over the years, stolen moments during the long, grueling hours of work, but this was different. This was a summons that felt loaded with unspoken implications. Clara stepped inside, her presence filling the small space with an intensity that left him breathless. The faint light illuminated her features, highlighting the worry creasing her brow. "I feel so alone," she confessed, her vulnerability laid bare before him. "I don't know who else to turn to." In that moment, as their eyes locked, Elijah realized that this encounter was not just a chance meeting. It was the beginning of something profound, something that could change the course of their lives forever. He felt a mix of emotions swirling within him: fear, excitement, confusion. Elijah had always been taught to keep his distance from the master's family, to avoid drawing attention to himself. Yet here was Clara, standing in his humble cabin, her presence a silent challenge to everything he had been conditioned to believe. She was a woman of status and privilege, and he was a boy relegated to the shadows of her world. As the tension in the air thickened, he found himself stepping closer, drawn to her plight. "What troubles you, Miss Clara?" he asked, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through his mind. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and for a moment both of them were suspended in time, caught between the expectations of their worlds and the undeniable connection forming in the space between them. "It's the oppressive weight of it all," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm trapped in a gilded cage, and I don't know how to escape." Elijah felt a pang of sympathy for her, recognizing the shared sense of entrapment they both experienced, albeit in different forms. The realization that Clara, too, felt powerless sparked a flicker of hope within him. Perhaps their destinies were more intertwined than he had ever imagined. But what Elijah didn't know was that Clara's visit was only the first of many. Each encounter would bring them closer to a precipice neither could afford to ignore, binding their fates in ways that would challenge the very fabric of their existence. The days that followed Clara's unexpected visit blurred into a tapestry of stolen moments and hushed conversations. Each evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon and the plantation settled into a quiet rhythm, Clara would slip away from her duties, seeking the solace of Elijah's cabin. Their meetings became a sanctuary from the harsh realities of their lives, each encounter a fragile secret that bound them closer together. Elijah found himself captivated by Clara's presence. She was more than just the master's wife. She was a woman filled with dreams and desires, trapped by the very society that elevated her. As they talked late into the night, their conversations danced through topics of hope, fear, and the longing for freedom. Clara shared stories of her childhood, painting vivid pictures of laughter echoing through the halls of her family's estate, of carefree days spent running through meadows, and of the suffocating expectations that had come with her marriage to a man she barely knew. "I feel like a ghost in my own life," she confessed one evening, her voice barely above a whisper, tinged with a mixture of sorrow and yearning. "Every day is a performance, and I'm tired of acting. I want to feel alive, to break free from these chains, even just for a moment." Elijah's heart ached for her. He could see the flicker of desperation in her eyes, a reflection of his own dreams for freedom. "You're not a ghost to me," he said softly, taking her hand in his. The warmth of her skin against his sent a shiver down his spine. "You are real, and you deserve to be seen." In that moment, as their eyes locked, an unspoken understanding passed between them, a shared recognition of their longing for something more. As the nights slipped into weeks, their bond deepened, but so too did the risks they faced. The plantation was a watchful place where every glance could be scrutinized and every whisper heard. Elijah was acutely aware of the danger that lurked in the shadows. The overseer, a cruel man with a penchant for violence, had begun to notice the late-night absences of Clara. Rumors could easily spread, and the consequences would be dire for both of them. One evening, as they sat on the porch of his cabin, Clara's expression turned serious, her brow furrowed with worry. "We can't continue this way, Elijah. If anyone finds out—" Her voice trailed off, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. "I know," he replied, his heart sinking at the thought, "but I can't bear the idea of losing you. You bring light to my darkest days." Her eyes softened, yet the fear was palpable. "What if we were to plan an escape? Just the two of us?" The idea hung between them like a fragile thread. The thought of freedom was intoxicating, yet the reality was daunting. They would have to navigate through woods thick with danger, evade prying eyes, and leave behind everything they had ever known. Elijah considered the proposal, his mind racing with possibilities and fears. "It would be dangerous," he cautioned, his voice trembling slightly. "But if we did it, we'd have to be smart, every step calculated. No mistakes." Clara nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I can't go on living like this." As they discussed their plans, the stars twinkled above them, indifferent to the turmoil below. They sketched their route in the dirt, mapping out a path toward the river that wound its way through the woods, an escape route that could lead them to freedom. The river, a symbol of life and movement, held the promise of a new beginning, but they both knew the journey would be fraught with peril. Yet the shadows around them grew darker, filled with the unseen eyes of the plantation. The overseer was becoming increasingly suspicious, and the tension in the air was thick with unspoken threats. Each meeting felt like a ticking clock, the urgency of their situation pressing down on them like a weight. Clara's late-night absences were becoming harder to explain, and Elijah could sense the tightening grip of danger surrounding them. As the days passed, Elijah noticed the way Clara's hands trembled slightly when she spoke of their plans, the flicker of fear in her eyes when she heard a distant voice calling for her. He wanted to reassure her, to promise that they would find a way, but the truth was that uncertainty loomed like a storm cloud over them. Each day, as they worked in the fields, the stakes grew higher. Elijah could feel the overseer's eyes on him, measuring his every move, searching for any sign of disobedience. One evening, as they sat on the porch, the moonlight casting a silvery glow around them, Clara leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if we leave tomorrow? The moon is full and the light will guide us. We can make it to the river before dawn, before anyone notices we're gone." Her voice trembled with excitement and fear, a mix of hope and the gravity of their decision. Elijah felt a rush of adrenaline at the thought. Tomorrow. It's risky, but it might be our only chance. He could hardly believe they were discussing escape, a dream that had felt so distant and unattainable just weeks before. But deep down, he also felt the weight of the unknown looming over them, the fear of what lay ahead, the uncertainty of their survival. As Clara's hand rested on his, he took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "If we do this, there's no turning back. We have to be ready for anything." She met his gaze, and in that moment they both understood the gravity of their choice. They were stepping into a world filled with uncertainty, but the desire for freedom burned brighter than the fear of the unknown. The shadows that had once felt suffocating now seemed to beckon them forward, daring them to take the leap into the life they had always dreamed of. As Clara leaned closer, whispering dreams of freedom into Elijah's ear, he felt the stirrings of hope mixed with fear. They were bound by the chains of their realities, yet together they dared to dream of breaking free. The time for action was drawing near, and with each passing moment the world outside beckoned them to take their first step into the unknown. The night arrived, cloaked in a thick blanket of darkness that wrapped around the plantation like a shroud. The moon hung high, a luminous sentinel in the sky, casting a silver glow over the land and illuminating the path that lay ahead for Elijah and Clara. Each shadow seemed to whisper secrets of freedom, urging them forward as they prepared for the most daring act of their lives. Elijah's heart raced with a mix of excitement and trepidation as he paced the small cabin, the air thick with anticipation. He had spent the day preparing, gathering what little he could carry, some stale bread, a small knife, and a few precious keepsakes that reminded him of home. Each item symbolized a piece of his life that he would leave behind, yet he knew he must fight for a future where he could live freely. Clara arrived just after sundown, her eyes wide with determination, but he could see the traces of fear lingering just beneath the surface. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steady despite the quiver in her hands, betraying the nerves that danced within her. "I've never been more ready for anything," Elijah replied, forcing a calmness he didn't entirely feel. The weight of their decision pressed heavily on his shoulders, but the thought of a life unshackled from oppression fueled his determination. They stepped outside, the cool night air wrapping around them like a comforting embrace. The sounds of the plantation, distant voices, the rustling of leaves, and the soft croaking of frogs filled the silence, creating a symphony of nature that felt both familiar and foreboding. Elijah led Clara toward the tree line, his heart pounding in rhythm with the urgency of their mission. As they entered the woods, the darkness enveloped them, the trees looming like ancient sentinels, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, casting eerie shadows on the ground. The path they had mapped out was etched in their minds, but the reality of navigating through the dense underbrush was more daunting than Elijah had anticipated. "Stay close," he whispered, reaching for Clara's hand, feeling the warmth of her palm against his, a grounding force amidst the chaos. The coolness of her skin offered a surge of courage, a reminder that they were in this together. They moved quietly, each step deliberate, listening for the faintest sounds that could betray their presence. The thrill of the unknown mingled with the fear of being caught, igniting a fire within them that pushed them forward. As they traveled deeper into the woods, the sounds of the plantation faded, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the distant call of an owl. Clara paused, her breath hitching in her throat. "What if they find us?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, vulnerability seeping through her bravado. "What if we're caught?" Elijah turned to her, his expression earnest, determined to project strength. "We won't be caught. We have to trust in each other and in our plan. We are stronger together." The conviction in his voice felt like a lifeline, and Clara nodded, drawing strength from his unwavering belief. After what felt like hours, they finally reached the riverbank. The water glistening under the moonlight like a ribbon of silver. The sight of it sent a thrill through Elijah's veins, a symbol of hope and a gateway to freedom. "This is it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, thick with emotion. "Once we cross, there's no turning back." As they stood at the edge of the water, they heard something, a rustle in the bushes behind them. Elijah's heart dropped as he turned, his instincts screaming at him to run. "Clara, we need to go, now." He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the river, urgency coursing through every fiber of his being. But before they could take a step, a shout echoed through the night, slicing through the silence like a knife. "Hey, stop right there!" Panic surged through Elijah as he recognized the voice, the overseer, a figure of authority who thrived on instilling fear. He had been watching them, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the moment to strike. "Run!" Elijah yelled, adrenaline coursing through his body as he pushed Clara toward the water. They plunged into the river, the cold water engulfing them and pulling them under momentarily. Elijah surfaced, gasping for breath, his heart racing as he looked for Clara. She emerged beside him, her eyes wide with fear but also with determination, her spirit unyielding. "We have to swim," she shouted, her voice barely audible over the rush of the current. They fought against the cold water, stroking with all their might as they made their way across. The river was a powerful force, but it was also their ally, carrying them away from the plantation and into the unknown. Behind them, shouts and splashes echoed. The overseer and his men had arrived at the riverbank, their voices filled with anger and desperation. "Don't look back," Elijah urged, his strokes becoming more frantic as they pushed toward the opposite shore. The weight of their lives hung in the balance, and they couldn't afford to falter now. Clara nodded, her expression resolute as she focused on the far bank. As they reached the other side, they scrambled onto the muddy bank, their bodies trembling from the cold and fear. Elijah glanced back just in time to see lanterns flickering in the distance, illuminating the figures of the overseer and his men. They were searching the water, shouting for them, their voices filled with rage and desperation. "We have to keep moving," Elijah urged, pulling Clara forward into the dense underbrush that lined the riverbank. They stumbled through the trees, their hearts pounding in their chests, adrenaline fueling their flight. The sounds of pursuit echoed behind them, the overseer's voice growing fainter but still relentless. "They can't follow us forever," Elijah panted, trying to reassure Clara, but the fear in her eyes mirrored his own uncertainty. They ran deeper into the woods, branches scratching at their skin and roots snagging at their feet. Each step felt like a leap into the unknown, but they pressed on, driven by the hope of freedom and the bond they had forged in the shadows. The forest, once a place of fear and confinement, now felt like a sanctuary, a refuge from the chains that had bound them. Finally, as dawn began to break and the first rays of sunlight pierced through the canopy, they found a small clearing. Exhausted and breathless, they collapsed onto the ground, the weight of their escape settling over them like a heavy blanket. The world felt surreal, as if they were caught between two realities, the one they had fled from and the one that lay ahead. "We made it," Clara gasped, her voice trembling with disbelief and relief as she looked at Elijah, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Elijah looked into her face, a mixture of relief and triumph washing over him. "We did," he replied, his heart swelling with pride. They had crossed the river, faced their fears, and taken the first steps toward freedom. But as the sun rose, casting golden light upon the world, they both knew their journey was far from over. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but together they would face whatever came next. For the first time in their lives, they were free. Free to make their own choices, to forge their own destinies, and to dream of a life unshackled by the chains of their past. As they lay in the clearing, breathing in the fresh scent of the earth around them, Elijah couldn't help but feel a sense of profound change. The sky was a canvas of oranges and pinks, signaling a new dawn, not just of day, but of possibility. He turned to Clara, who was gazing at the horizon, her expression a mix of wonder and determination. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile peace they had found. Elijah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world lift slightly from his shoulders. "Now we find our way. We may need to head north toward the Free States. There are people who can help us, those who believe in freedom for everyone." Clara nodded, her resolve renewed. "And we'll do it together, won't we?" "Always," he replied, taking her hand once more, a silent promise that their bond would carry them through whatever lay ahead. As they rose to their feet, the sun fully broke over the horizon, bathing the world in light. The shadows of their past began to recede, replaced by the warmth of hope and the thrill of adventure. They were no longer just survivors, they were seekers of freedom, embarking on a journey that would change their lives forever. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting warm rays that penetrated the canopy of trees above, creating a dappled pattern on the forest floor. Elijah and Clara stood at the edge of the clearing, their hearts pounding with the thrill of escape but also heavy with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. They had tasted freedom, but the journey was just beginning. "Which way do we go?" Clara asked, her voice steadying as she surveyed the landscape. The woods stretched endlessly before them, a labyrinth of twists and turns, each path promising both danger and possibility. The trees stood like ancient guardians, their branches intertwining to form a natural archway that beckoned them forward. Elijah took a moment to gather his thoughts, recalling the stories he had heard from other enslaved people who had fled. "We need to head north," he said finally, pointing toward a faint trail that wound deeper into the forest. "There's a network of safe houses, a group called the Underground Railroad. If we can reach them, they'll help us get to the Free States." His voice was filled with determination, but he could feel the weight of fear and uncertainty pressing down on him. Clara nodded, determination etched on her face as she squared her shoulders. "Then that's where we'll go." The resolve in her voice sparked a flicker of hope in Elijah's heart, reminding him of the strength they had found in each other. They set off, moving cautiously through the underbrush, their senses heightened. Every sound, a bird's call, the crackle of twigs underfoot, reminded them of the danger that still lurked nearby. The overseer and his men would not rest until they were found, and the thought of being caught sent a shiver down Elijah's spine. Each rustle of leaves seemed amplified in the stillness of the forest, a reminder of the peril that surrounded them. As they walked, Elijah tried to keep their spirits up, sharing stories of hope and resilience he had heard from others. "There are people out there who risk their lives to help us," he told Clara, his eyes shining with conviction. "They believe everyone deserves to be free, no matter the color of their skin. We just have to reach them." His words flowed like a balm over the fear that threatened to overwhelm them. Clara listened intently, her eyes brightening with each tale. "I never imagined there were so many who cared," she said, her voice filled with wonder. The thought that they were not alone in their struggle nourished her spirit, feeding the flame of hope that had begun to flicker within her. Their path twisted and turned, the terrain becoming more rugged as they ventured deeper into the woods. The trees stood tall around them, their leaves whispering secrets, but the serenity of nature was occasionally interrupted by the distant sounds of pursuit. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a branch made them jump, their hearts racing with fear. After hours of walking, they paused for a moment to catch their breath. Elijah leaned against a tree, wiping the sweat from his brow. "We should find somewhere to rest for the night," he suggested, glancing at Clara. "We'll need our strength for tomorrow." Clara nodded, her exhaustion evident as she ran a hand through her disheveled hair. "But where? We can't risk being seen." Elijah scanned their surroundings, his eyes landing on a thicket of bushes nearby. "Over there," he said, pointing to a dense cluster of underbrush that could provide some cover. It's not much, but it'll have to do. They crawled into the thicket, grateful for the shelter it provided. Once inside, Clara pulled out the small bag of food Elijah had packed. "It's not much, but it's better than nothing," she said, handing him a piece of bread. As they shared their meager meal, the reality of their situation sank in. They were fugitives now, living on the edge, relying on each other for support. The weight of their choice hung heavy in the air, but so did the flicker of hope that coursed through their veins. Each bite of bread was a reminder of their resilience, a testament to their determination to survive. "Do you think we'll actually make it?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile peace they had found. Elijah met her gaze, feeling the gravity of her question. "I believe we will," he replied, his voice firm and steady. "We have each other, and we're not alone. There are others out there fighting for the same thing." Clara smiled faintly, her faith in their journey bolstered by his words. "Then we'll keep moving forward, no matter what." As night fell, they huddled together for warmth, the sounds of the forest enveloping them like a protective blanket. The soft chirping of crickets and the distant call of owls created a lullaby of nature, soothing yet filled with an undercurrent of tension. The stars twinkled above, each one a beacon of hope guiding them toward freedom, a stark contrast to the darkness they had fled. The next morning they awoke with the first light of dawn, the air crisp and cool. After a quick breakfast, they set out once more, determination driving them onward. The path was less clear now, but Elijah relied on his instincts, leading Clara through the woods with a fierce resolve. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows behind them. They took turns leading the way, each step bringing them closer to the unknown. As they walked, they encountered a small stream, its water sparkling in the sunlight. They paused to drink, the cool liquid refreshing their spirits and invigorating their weary bodies. "Do you think we're far enough away?" Clara asked, glancing over her shoulder, her anxiety creeping back into her voice. Elijah nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at him. "We've put distance between us and the plantation, but we can't let our guard down. We need to keep moving." Just as they were about to leave the stream, a sudden rustling in the underbrush froze them in place. Elijah's heart raced as he turned to Clara, eyes wide with fear. "Get behind me," he whispered urgently, his instincts taking over. They held their breath, straining to listen as the sound grew closer. A figure emerged from the trees, a tall man with a weathered face and piercing eyes. He was dressed in a long coat, his demeanor both intimidating and commanding. "Who goes there?" he called out, his voice deep and authoritative, echoing through the stillness of the woods. Elijah stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "We mean no harm. We're just passing through." The man's gaze softened slightly, but he remained cautious. "You're running, aren't you? From the plantation?" Elijah nodded slowly, gauging the man's reaction. "Yes, sir. We're seeking freedom." The man studied them for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You're brave to venture into these woods alone. There are dangers here, and not all who wander are friendly." Clara stepped forward, her voice steady despite the uncertainty of their situation. "We're willing to take the risks. We just want a chance at a better life." Her determination shone through, and Elijah felt a swell of pride for her bravery. The man's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment Elijah feared he would turn them away. But then the man's expression softened again, as if he had seen something in their eyes that resonated with him. "My name is Samuel," he said, his tone shifting. "I'm a conductor on the Underground Railroad. I help those who seek freedom find their way." Elijah felt a wave of hope wash over him, filling the void of fear that had momentarily gripped him. "Can you take us to safety?" Samuel nodded, gesturing for them to follow him. "Stay close and keep quiet. We'll move quickly." As they ventured deeper into the woods, Samuel led them down hidden paths, his knowledge of the terrain evident in his every step. He explained the intricate network of safe houses that awaited them and the people who risked their lives to help those seeking freedom. "Many have come before you," he said, his voice low and steady. "And many will come after. It's a dangerous journey, but it's worth the risk." Clara's eyes sparkled with newfound hope as they walked, listening intently to Samuel's stories of courage and resilience. Each tale painted a vivid picture of others who had fought for their freedom, fueling their determination to succeed. The idea that they were part of something larger than themselves, a movement of brave souls, ignited a fire within Clara's heart. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged from the woods into a clearing. Before them stood a modest cabin, smoke curling from the chimney, a welcoming sight amidst the uncertainty. "This is one of our safe houses," Samuel said, leading them to the door. "You'll be safe here for now. We'll make plans to move you further north when the time is right." As they stepped inside, the warmth of the cabin enveloped them, a stark contrast to the chill of the woods outside. A woman greeted them, her face lined with kindness and understanding. "Welcome," she said, her voice soothing, as if she had been expecting them. "You're safe here." Elijah and Clara exchanged relieved glances, the weight of their journey momentarily lifted. They had made it to safety, but they knew the road ahead would still be fraught with challenges. As they settled into their new surroundings, Clara felt a sense of hope blossoming within her. They were no longer alone. They were part of something greater, a movement for freedom, a fight for their lives. The cabin was filled with the scent of fresh bread and herbs, and they were offered warm food that filled their empty stomachs. As Clara ate, she observed the other people in the cabin. Some were resting, while others shared stories of their own journeys, recounting their escapes with a mix of pride and sorrow. Each story added to the tapestry of resilience surrounding them, inspiring Clara and Elijah to believe in the possibility of a future beyond their wildest dreams. After a hearty meal, Samuel gathered everyone around the fireplace, his expression serious. "We need to prepare for what lies ahead. The journey to freedom is not just a physical one. It's a mental and emotional battle as well. You will face challenges, and you will need to rely on one another." Elijah felt a surge of determination at Samuel's words. They had already faced so much, and the thought of what lay ahead no longer filled him with dread, but with the thrill of possibility. Clara, sitting close to Elijah, leaned in to whisper, "Do you think we can really make it all the way?" Elijah nodded, squeezing her hand. "I know we can. Together, we are stronger." As night fell, the flickering firelight cast dancing shadows on the walls of the cabin, creating a cocoon of warmth and safety. They shared laughter and stories, weaving their individual experiences into a collective narrative of hope and determination. But as they settled into the comfort of the cabin, the reality of their situation lingered in the back of Elijah's mind. The overseer and his men were still searching, and they could not afford to let their guard down. "Tomorrow we will move again," Samuel announced, breaking into Elijah's thoughts. "We'll set out at dawn. It's important to stay ahead of those who might be looking for you." Elijah exchanged a glance with Clara, both of them understanding the urgency. "We'll be ready," he assured Samuel. As they prepared for bed, Clara turned to Elijah, her expression thoughtful. "What if we encounter others along the way? What if they're not friendly?" Elijah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her concerns. "We'll be cautious. We'll stick together no matter what. I promise." As they lay side by side on the floor, the warmth of the fire a comfort against the cool night air, Clara closed her eyes, her heart racing with a mix of anticipation and fear. They had come so far, but the road ahead was still fraught with uncertainty. "Do you think we'll find a place where we can truly be free?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper in the stillness of the cabin. Elijah turned to her, his gaze steady. "I believe we will. There are places where people live without fear, where they can be who they truly are. We just have to keep moving forward until we find it." Clara smiled softly, the warmth of his words wrapping around her like a blanket. "Together?" "Always," he replied, feeling a surge of resolve. As they drifted off to sleep, the fires of hope burned brightly within them, illuminating the darkness of their past and guiding them toward a future filled with promise. Dawn broke gently, the soft light filtering through the cracks in the cabin walls, casting warm hues over the sleeping figures inside. The air was crisp, filled with the earthy scent of pine and the lingering aroma of bread from the previous night's meal. Elijah stirred first, the thrill of anticipation coursing through him as he recalled their newfound safety. But the reality of their situation quickly returned, reminding him that they were still fugitives on a perilous journey. He rose quietly, careful not to disturb Clara, who was still nestled against him, her face peaceful in sleep. Watching her, he felt a surge of protectiveness. He knew he had to keep her safe, no matter the obstacles that lay ahead. As he prepared for the day, he mentally reviewed their plans, the importance of sticking to the agreed-upon route weighing heavily on his mind. Samuel entered the common room, his presence commanding yet reassuring. He greeted Elijah with a nod, his expression serious. "Good morning. We'll be leaving soon. I hope you're ready." Elijah nodded, his heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. "We are," he replied, glancing back at Clara. "Is it safe to move?" "For now, yes," Samuel said, his tone grave. "But we need to keep our pace. The sooner we reach the next safe house, the better." As the others began to stir, Clara awoke, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "What time is it?" she asked, her voice thick with fatigue. "Time to move," Elijah replied, a smile breaking across his face. "We're heading out soon." Clara's eyes widened and she quickly sat up, her earlier weariness replaced with determination. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. After a quick breakfast of bread and dried fruit, they gathered their belongings and prepared to leave. Samuel led the way out of the cabin, his demeanor focused and alert. The morning sun shone brightly, illuminating the path ahead and casting long shadows behind them. As they stepped outside, Clara took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the crisp air, invigorated by the scent of pine and earth. The forest felt alive around them, the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves creating a natural symphony that accompanied their journey. They walked in a tight formation, Samuel at the front, Elijah and Clara side by side, and a few others from the safe house following closely behind. Each step felt like a step toward destiny, but the tension of their situation was palpable. Elijah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Stay close," Samuel instructed, his voice low but firm as they moved through the underbrush. "We'll be taking a less direct route to avoid any patrols. Follow my lead and don't make a sound." The group navigated through the woods, weaving between trees and ducking beneath low-hanging branches. As they walked, Elijah felt an overwhelming sense of camaraderie growing among them. They were all bound by the same dream of freedom, and that connection fueled their resilience. As they advanced deeper into the forest, Clara leaned closer to Elijah, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think we'll really make it to the Free States?" Elijah looked into her eyes, seeing the flicker of doubt that lingered there. "I know we will," he assured her, squeezing her hand gently. "We just have to keep trusting in each other and in the people helping us." With each passing moment, the trees grew denser, their trunks thick and gnarled, the underbrush more tangled. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting a mosaic of light and shadow on the forest floor. Elijah found himself lost in thought, contemplating the journey they had undertaken and the sacrifices they had made. Each step was not just a step toward freedom, it was a step away from everything they had ever known, and that realization weighed heavily on his heart. After hours of walking, they paused by a small stream to drink and rest. The water sparkled in the sunlight, inviting and cool. Clara knelt by the water, splashing her face and laughing softly at the refreshing coolness. "It feels good," doesn't it?" she said, glancing back at Elijah with a smile that lit up her face. "Yeah, it does," he replied, his spirit lifting at the sight of her joy. The moment was fleeting, but it reminded him of the simple pleasures of life that had been stripped away for far too long. As Clara filled her hands with water, she looked at Elijah, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think they're still looking for us?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "I'm sure of it," Elijah replied, his tone heavy. "But we can't let that stop us. We have to keep moving." As they resumed their journey, the forest began to change around them. The trees grew taller and thicker, the underbrush denser. Samuel led them to a narrow path that twisted through the trees, guiding them deeper into the heart of the woods. But as they pressed on, an uneasy feeling settled over Elijah. The woods felt different, almost oppressive, as if the trees themselves were closing in. He glanced at Clara, whose brow was furrowed in concentration. "Stay close," he whispered again, his instincts kicking in. Suddenly, the stillness was shattered by the sound of distant shouting. The voices grew louder, echoing through the trees. Samuel's expression shifted from focused to alarmed. "We need to move. Now!" Panic surged through the group as they hurried down the path, their feet pounding against the earth. Elijah's heart raced as adrenaline coursed through him. He and Clara exchanged anxious glances, their unspoken fears reflected in each other's eyes. "Do you think it's them?" Clara panted, trying to keep pace with Elijah as they ran. "I don't know," he replied, his voice strained, "but we can't stop to find out." They dashed through the trees, the sounds of pursuit growing closer. Samuel led them off the main path, veering into a thicket of underbrush. "This way," he urged, pushing through the dense foliage. Elijah and Clara followed closely behind, their hearts pounding in their chests as they moved deeper into the woods. They could hear the voices of the overseer and his men now, harsh and demanding, slicing through the tranquility of the forest. "Don't stop! They can't be far," a voice called out, sending a jolt of fear through Elijah. They pressed on, navigating the tangled roots and branches, trying to stay silent even as their breaths came in frantic gasps. The fear of being caught filled the air, thickening it with tension. Samuel led them to a small clearing, a hidden enclave surrounded by towering trees. He motioned for everyone to crouch down, and they quickly obeyed, hearts pounding as they huddled together, trying to remain as quiet as possible. Elijah could hear the men getting closer, their voices growing louder as they combed through the woods. "They must be around here somewhere," the overseer shouted, his voice dripping with anger. "Split up and search the area." The sound of footsteps grew louder, echoing in Elijah's ears. He held Clara's hand tightly, feeling her trembling beside him. "We'll be okay," he whispered, trying to reassure her despite the fear that gripped him. As the men spread out, Samuel's eyes darted around the clearing, searching for a way out. "We need to wait until they pass. If we move now, we'll be seen." Minutes felt like hours as they crouched in the underbrush, the tension thick in the air. Elijah's heart raced as he strained to listen, the fear of discovery coursing through him. Clara's grip on his hand tightened and he turned to look at her, wanting to convey strength and reassurance. Finally, the voices began to fade as the overseer and his men moved further away, their shouts diminishing into the distance. Samuel slowly relaxed, signaling for everyone to remain still for a moment longer. Once the coast was clear, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Okay, we can move now," he said, his voice low but firm. "Stay close and follow my lead." They cautiously emerged from the clearing, moving quickly yet quietly through the woods. The fear of being caught still loomed large, but the adrenaline from their narrow escape propelled them forward. As they continued to navigate the treacherous terrain, Elijah felt a renewed sense of determination. They had faced danger and come out on the other side. They could do this. After what felt like hours, they finally reached a small cabin tucked away in a secluded area. It was older, with a weathered exterior but sturdy enough to provide shelter. Samuel approached the door, knocking softly. A moment later, an older woman opened it, her expression warm but cautious. "Samuel, you've brought more?" she asked, her eyes scanning the group. "Just passing through," Samuel replied, his tone serious. "We need to rest and regroup." "Come in, quickly," she urged, ushering them inside. The interior of the cabin was cozy, filled with the scent of herbs and wood smoke. A fire crackled in the hearth, filling the space with warmth. The woman introduced herself as Miss Lydia, and she quickly set about making tea and preparing food for the weary travelers. Elijah and Clara settled onto a pair of wooden chairs, the relief of being safe washing over them. They exchanged glances, their hearts still racing from the encounter in the woods. "Are you all right?" Clara asked, her voice filled with concern as she reached for Elijah's hand. "I am," he replied, squeezing her hand gently. "We're safe for now." Miss Lydia joined them with steaming cups of tea, setting one in front of each person. "Drink up. You'll need your strength," she said, her voice soothing as she looked at each of them with understanding. As they sipped the warm tea, Elijah felt the tension in his muscles begin to ease. The warmth spread through him, comforting and invigorating. "Thank you for helping us," Clara said, her voice sincere. "We wouldn't have made it without Samuel." "Any time," Miss Lydia replied with a smile. "It's what we do. We look out for each other." As they gathered around the fire, sharing stories of their journeys, Elijah felt a sense of belonging swell within him. They were part of a community, a network of individuals united by a common goal. "We'll have to move again soon," Samuel said, breaking into their conversation. "But for now, let's rest and gather our strength. We need to be ready for what comes next." Elijah nodded, feeling the weight of the journey ahead. They had come so far, but the road to freedom was still fraught with uncertainty. As night fell and the fire crackled softly, Clara leaned against Elijah, her head resting on his shoulder. "Do you think we'll find a place where we can truly be free?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper in the stillness of the cabin. Elijah turned to her, his gaze steady. "I believe we will. There are places where people live without fear, where they can be who they truly are. We just have to keep moving forward until we find it." The warmth of her presence and the flickering firelight wrapped around him like a comforting embrace. Together they would navigate the challenges ahead, drawing strength from the hope that flickered in their hearts, a hope that promised a future unmarred by the chains of their past. As they settled in for the night, Elijah closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of peace. They were not just surviving. They were fighting for their lives, for their dreams, and for a future filled with possibility. Clara stirred next to him, and he felt her warmth against him, a reminder of the bond they had forged through their shared struggles. "What if we never find that place?" she asked quietly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Elijah opened his eyes, looking down at her. "We have to believe that we will. Hope is what keeps us moving. If we lose that, we lose everything." Clara nodded, her expression softening as she absorbed his words. "You're right. We can't give up. Not now." As the fire crackled and the night deepened around them, Elijah felt a sense of purpose solidifying within him. They had faced danger and uncertainty, but they had also found hope and community. That was something worth fighting for. With Clara by his side, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. They were no longer alone. They were part of something greater, a movement for freedom, a fight for their lives. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight, they were safe. And that was enough. The morning sun broke through the trees, casting golden rays over the cabin as the group stirred from their slumber. Elijah awoke to the comforting sound of birds chirping outside, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that had filled their journey thus far. Clara was still nestled against him, her hair tousled and her face relaxed in sleep. He felt a rush of affection for her. She was his anchor in this storm of chaos. As if sensing his gaze, Clara stirred and opened her eyes. "Good morning," she mumbled, a sleepy smile spreading across her face. "Good morning," Elijah replied, returning her smile. "Ready for another day?" She nodded, determination shining in her eyes, but he could still see the flicker of anxiety lingering beneath the surface. "I just hope today goes smoothly," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together," he assured her, squeezing her hand. Her grip tightened in response, and they shared a moment of silent understanding. They were bound not just by their shared experiences, but by a deep-seated trust that had grown between them. The smell of breakfast wafted through the cabin, drawing them both toward the kitchen area. Miss Lydia was bustling about, preparing a hearty meal of porridge and berries. "You two look bright-eyed this morning," she said, her voice warm and inviting. "Eat up. You'll need your strength for the journey ahead." As they gathered around the table with the others, the atmosphere was filled with camaraderie. They shared stories over breakfast, laughter mingling with the clatter of utensils. Elijah felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in a long time. Here, in this humble cabin, they were not just fugitives, they were part of a community working toward a common goal. After breakfast, Samuel gathered everyone in the main room, his expression serious. "Today, we move again. The next safe house is a day's journey from here, and we need to keep our heads down. The patrols have been increasing in the area, so we'll take a less traveled route." Elijah's heart sank slightly at the mention of patrols. The danger was ever present, but he reminded himself that they were not alone. They had each other and a network of allies who believed in their cause. "Are we ready?" Clara asked, her voice steady as she looked around at the group. Everyone nodded, and with that they gathered their belongings, preparing to leave the safety of the cabin behind. As they stepped outside, the cool morning air invigorated them. The forest was alive with sounds: birds singing, leaves rustling in the breeze, and the distant sound of a brook. Samuel led the way, his movements deliberate as he guided them along a narrow path that wound through the trees. Elijah stayed close to Clara, their hands intertwined as they navigated the terrain together. As they walked, Elijah couldn't help but steal glances at Clara. She seemed to draw strength from their surroundings, her confidence growing with each step they took. "You're getting stronger," he remarked, his voice low so only she could hear. Clara looked up at him, her expression softening. "I think it's because of you. Knowing you're by my side makes me feel like I can take on anything." The words warmed Elijah's heart, and he felt a surge of pride and protectiveness. "We're in this together, Clara. No matter what happens, I'll always be here." The path led them deeper into the woods, the trees closing in around them, creating a canopy of green that filtered the sunlight. As they walked, Elijah felt a mix of hope and trepidation. Each step forward was a step into the unknown, and he couldn't shake the feeling that danger lurked just beyond the trees. After a few hours of walking, they stopped to rest by a small clearing. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting a warm glow on the ground. They dropped their packs and settled onto the soft earth, grateful for the respite. Samuel surveyed the area, his expression vigilant. "Let's take a quick break, but stay alert. We don't want to linger too long." Elijah took a moment to catch his breath, glancing at Clara. She was nibbling on a piece of dried fruit, her brow furrowed in concentration. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the weight of their journey pressing down on her. "Everything okay?" he asked, concern creeping into his voice. She looked up, her eyes meeting his. "Just trying to stay focused. I know we're close, but I can't shake the feeling that something's not right." "Trust your instincts," he encouraged, his voice steady. "We'll figure it out together." As they rested, a sense of unease settled over Elijah. The air felt charged, as if something was about to happen. He scanned the trees, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. Suddenly, a rustling noise broke the stillness of the clearing. Everyone froze, eyes wide, hearts racing. Samuel shot them a look, signaling for silence. Elijah's breath hitched in his throat as he strained to listen. The rustling grew louder, and a figure emerged from the trees, a man in a tattered coat, his face gaunt and weary. "Please, help me," the man gasped, collapsing to the ground before them. Samuel moved quickly, rushing to the man's side. "What happened?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "I was with a group, but we got separated. They captured some of us. I managed to escape, but I'm alone now," the man panted, his eyes wide with fear. "They're hunting us down." Elijah felt a surge of sympathy for the man. He could see the desperation in his eyes, the fear that mirrored their own. "You're safe here," he assured him, moving closer. "We're all trying to get to safety." "Can you take me with you?" the man pleaded, looking at each of them in turn. "I can't go back. They'll kill me." Samuel exchanged a glance with Elijah, weighing their options. "It's risky," he said, his voice low. "We can't afford to draw attention to ourselves." "We can't leave him," Clara spoke up, her voice firm. "He's just like us. We have to help him." Elijah felt a swell of admiration for Clara's compassion. She was right. They couldn't turn their backs on someone in need. "What's your name?" he asked the man, trying to keep his tone steady. "Jacob," he replied, his voice shaking. "Please, I'll do anything to help. Just don't leave me." Samuel sighed, his expression conflicted. "All right, but we have to move quickly. If patrols are nearby, we'll be putting ourselves at risk. Stay close and follow my lead." As they gathered their things, Jacob struggled to his feet, leaning heavily against a tree for support. Elijah helped him, offering his arm as they resumed their journey. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of their decision hanging heavily in the air. They continued down the path, the tension palpable. Jacob walked slowly, clearly weakened from his ordeal, but he pushed through, determined to stay with them. Clara walked beside him, offering words of encouragement, her kindness shining through the fear that enveloped them. After a while they reached a fork in the path, and Samuel halted, his brow furrowed in contemplation. "We can either go left, which is longer but safer, or right, which is more direct but riskier. I need everyone's input." Elijah glanced at Clara, whose eyes were wide with uncertainty. "What do you think?" he asked her quietly. "I think we should take the safer route," she replied, her voice steady despite the tension. "I'd rather be safe than sorry." Jacob nodded in agreement, his face pale. "I don't think I can handle any more danger right now." Samuel sighed, his expression thoughtful. "Then we'll go left. Stay alert and keep your voices down." They took the left path, the woods growing denser as they moved. The shadows deepened, creating an eerie atmosphere that heightened their senses. Elijah kept close to Clara, their hands still intertwined, drawing strength from one another. As they walked, Elijah's thoughts drifted to the future. What would it be like to finally reach the Free States? To live without fear? To build a life where they could be safe and free? The thought was intoxicating, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose. But just as quickly as it came, the thought was interrupted by the sound of voices in the distance. Elijah's heart dropped. "Samuel, do you hear that?" he whispered urgently. Samuel nodded, his expression grave. "We need to move off the path, now." They hurried into the trees, ducking beneath low branches and thick foliage. Elijah's heart raced as they pressed on, the voices growing louder and more distinct. Panic surged through him as he realized they were getting closer. "Stay low and quiet," Samuel instructed, his voice barely above a whisper. Elijah felt Clara's hand tighten around his as they crouched behind a large bush, hearts pounding in unison. The voices were now unmistakable, laced with anger and urgency. "Split up! They can't have gone far," a man shouted, his voice filled with authority. Elijah held his breath, fear coursing through him. He glanced at Clara, who was wide-eyed, her face pale with anxiety. "We can't let them find us," he whispered, his heart racing. "Don't let fear take over," Clara urged, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We'll get through this. We have to trust in each other." Just then, a figure emerged from the underbrush, a man dressed in the uniform of a patroller. He stopped, scanning the area, and Elijah's heart pounded in his chest. They were too close, too exposed. "Over here," the man shouted, moving toward their hiding spot. Elijah felt panic rising in his throat. "We need to move," he hissed, but before they could react, the man spotted them. "Hey, you!" he shouted, lunging forward. Samuel acted quickly, grabbing Jacob by the arm and pulling him deeper into the underbrush. "Run!" he yelled, urging everyone to flee. Elijah grabbed Clara's hand and pulled her with him as they dashed through the trees, adrenaline propelling them forward. They could hear the man shouting behind them, calling for reinforcements. "Go! Go!" Samuel urged, leading the way through the thick underbrush. Elijah's heart raced as they ran, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the forest. Clara was right beside him, her breath coming in quick gasps. He could feel the fear radiating off her, but he held tightly to her hand. "Keep going," he shouted, trying to encourage her. Samuel led them through a narrow gap between two trees, and they stumbled into a small clearing. "This way," he called, urging them to follow him toward a thicket of bushes. They ducked inside, huddling together as they caught their breath. The sound of the patrol grew fainter, but Elijah knew they couldn't let their guard down. "Is everyone okay?" Samuel asked, his voice low and urgent. "Yes," Clara panted, her eyes wide with fear. "But what do we do now?" "We wait here for a moment and assess the situation," Samuel replied, scanning the surroundings. "We can't stay here for long, but we need to make sure it's safe before we move again." As they crouched in the thicket, Elijah's mind raced. They were so close to freedom, yet danger was always lurking just around the corner. He looked at Clara, whose face was pale but resolute. "We'll find a way," he whispered, determination flooding through him. After what felt like an eternity, Samuel signaled for them to move. "Let's go. Stay close and keep quiet." They slipped out of the thicket and moved cautiously through the trees, the fear of being caught still fresh in their minds. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced along the forest floor. As they continued onward, Elijah felt a sense of urgency driving him. They had come too far to turn back now. Each step was a testament to their resilience, a reminder of the strength they found in each other. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the edge of the woods. Before them lay a vast expanse of open land, dotted with wildflowers and tall grasses that swayed gently in the breeze. The sight was breathtaking, a stark contrast to the darkness they had just escaped. "This is it," Samuel said, his voice filled with hope. "We're almost there. The safe house is just beyond that ridge." Elijah's heart swelled at the thought. They were so close to freedom, to safety. He glanced at Clara, who was gazing out over the landscape, her expression a mix of awe and determination. "Are you ready?" he asked, squeezing her hand. She nodded, her eyes shining with resolve. "I've never been more ready." With renewed strength they pressed onward, crossing the open land with purpose. The sun warmed their backs, and the wind whispered promises of freedom as they moved toward their destination. As they crested the ridge, Elijah's heart raced with anticipation. Before them lay a small cabin surrounded by fields of wildflowers, a haven of safety. "That's it," Samuel exclaimed, pointing toward the cabin. "We made it." They rushed down the slope, hearts pounding with excitement and relief. As they approached the cabin, the door swung open, revealing a warm, inviting interior. A woman stood in the doorway, her expression welcoming. "Welcome. You must be the travelers Samuel spoke of," she said, her smile bright and genuine. Elijah's heart soared as they crossed the threshold into the safe house. They had made it. Against all odds, they had reached a place where they could finally begin to breathe freely. As they settled into their new surroundings, Elijah felt a sense of hope blossoming within him. They were no longer just fugitives, they were survivors, part of a community that believed in freedom and unity. And as they began to share their stories and dreams, Elijah knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, one filled with possibility, strength, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow.